Welcome to the LB's The Lover of Books Author Chat. If this is your first time or watching or recording, hello and thanks for joining. Please make sure you click subscribe to my channel, LB The Lover of Books. I have 44 author chats recorded there and uploaded so you can watch them at any time. And the number keeps growing. We're up to 8,900 hours watched. So feel free to find something that you've read and you can go back and dive even deeper and find out more. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. And also remember, if you have an author that you want to hear from, let me know that too. But now we have a wonderful author here, amazing best-selling Amy Jo Burns. She is the author of the memoir Cinderland and novel Shiner, which was a Barnes& Noble Discover pick, NPR Best Book of the Year, and told this, I love this quote, and told in language as incandescent as smoldering coal. Woo, that's hot. According to the New York Times. Her latest novel, Mercury, is a Barnes& Noble book club pick. And I'm sure some of you got this book as a book of the month pick. It's People Magazine Book of the Week and Editor's Choice selection in the New York Times. She's appeared in the Paris Review, Daily, Elle, Good Housekeeping, and Anthology, Not That Bad. She is a Western Pennsylvania native. I'm sure you're not surprised about that. But she now lives in New Jersey with her family. Welcome, Amy Jo. Thank you so much for joining us.
Laura Beth, I've been looking forward to this. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in, and Laura Beth for organizing, and Court Street for all logging on. This is just the best way to spend a Monday night. So thank you.
Perfect. Well, we're here to talk about Mercury, and I'm just going to give a quick little summary. A roofing family's bonds of loyalty are tested when they uncover a long hidden secret at the heart of their blue collar town. And so I'm going to start with that blue collar town first and foremost. What does Mercury mean to you? Where did this come from?
Yeah, so this is one of the, I think, best things about writing this book. So my first book, Cinderland, was a memoir. It's a coming of age memoir set in my hometown in Western Pennsylvania. And the name of my hometown is Mercer, Pennsylvania. And when I was writing the book, I decided at first, I was like, I don't want to use the name of the town because the book is about, why a young woman needs to keep a secret and how secrets reverberate throughout a lifetime and throughout a small community. And I really didn't want the emphasis of that book to be look at this weird place on a map or anything like that. I really wanted people to feel the love that I have for it and the sort of tortured feelings I have. And the thing about a small town is it's really hard to get to and it's hard to leave. I think both things are true. And so I loved the idea of kind of giving it this planetary feel. So that's why I chose the name Mercury. And when I sat down to sort of write this project, I didn't even know what I was writing. I was kind of just writing things that were coming to my mind from memories and things like that. And the first scene of the book is sort of this man who's smoking a cigarette behind the bleachers and he's hiding from his wife. And that's a memory of mine that I have. And then I kind of built the story around there. And I'd always wanted to write a book about a family of roofers because that's what I come from. And so then there was no question that if I'm going to write about roofers, I have to do it in my hometown. And it was really wonderful to revisit all of that because, when you write a memoir, it's all real people, real events, real places. And so it was nice to keep the real places of consequence that really matter to me, but to put made up characters in a place I know so well. So that's sort of how that came to be. I never thought I would set another book there, but it continues to be a really inspiring place for me. It feels like home and sort of haunted and all of that good stuff. So it just feels like a great place to set a novel.
Well, it sounds like some pieces of you may still be there in Mercer,
Absolutely.
Mercury. What is the same? I mean, is the church there? Is the bell tower? I mean, is that all live structure we could see?
Yes. So that was another thing I thought would be kind of cool because when you read a book that's set in like Paris or New York City or something like that, there's this you kind of take for granted everybody knows what the Empire State Building is. Everybody knows what the Eiffel Tower is. And I love the idea of just letting the landmarks that everybody in my town knows sort of hold that kind of weight. So the church, the Presbyterian Church, is a real place. So that's in the novel. If you haven't read it, that's where a lot of these juicy scenes in the book happen, and that's where some of the secrets are kept. And so you can totally go to that church. It's the way that I described it in the book is the way that it is. And the funny thing is, my dad actually, this was maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but he went up in there to repair the steeple. So he's the one that I drafted that part of the book based on exactly what happened to him, where he climbed up through the counting room and he pulls down the hatch to this attic and all these bats fly in his face. That
That
happened
really
to
happened.
him.
The bat scene's real.
Yes, the bat scene is real, minus what Waylon finds up there.
Yeah.
That was definitely placed. But it was great because my dad told me that, and I got to talk to him about, like, oh, I want to kind of write this mysterious beginning. And so he helped me figure out all the details, like how something would be up there, and how it might come out and all those things. Because he has so many kind of creepy stories like that. But the cool thing about this particular one was that was where we went to church. You know what I mean? So
Right.
having my dad go up in there, and then also you can climb all the way up to the top, and that's, if you go into the website of this church, they have an aerial view, and like that's this how you can see the whole town, and it's really beautiful. So the church is real, the ballpark is real. The house that the Joseph family lives in is very much inspired by this old Victorian house in the center of town that my grandparents were living in when I grew up, and it has that little apartment where Waylon and Marley live, and so and a music room and a big dining room and all that. So I kept as much as I could that was real, so that people who know the town would be able to say, "Oh, I know this, this, this," and then for people who maybe have never been to the town can get that sense that, man, this really feels like a real place, because it is. Or if you ever wanted to go on a walking tour, you could.
I kind of want the pictures on your website or your Insta. Like, I want to see that house because I have a picture in my mind. I just like the great house. I don't know. I
Yeah,
would love that
and the thing
visual.
is, so they don't live there anymore, and the person who bought it redid it very beautifully and kind of restored it to its old glamour, but so it looks beautiful, but it's also not the house that I know. But I have, so my best friend, one of my best friends from home, still lives in Mercer, and she kind of lives across the street from him. So I'm like, if that house ever goes up for sale, if they ever do some sort of like open house, call me. I'm getting in the car, and because I'm dying to see the inside of it, but if I ever, get pictures, I'm absolutely going to post them, just because it's a huge part of the book, obviously, but also of my childhood. So I'm dying to go in there and look around.
Best friend's not named Opal or Ruby or something like that, is she?
No, no.
Just second. I feel like Mercury was its own character in the book, though. Not all the time does a town take on that persona, but it did feel like it had its own place in the book.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that kind of, at least to me, that feels like when you grow up in a small town, that small town is sort of like an extended relative of yours, and it's something that everybody shares, and you kind of all grow up together with this. It's almost like a matriarch, like everybody's kind of under this umbrella of this one person. And I mean, I think what I have felt about small towns is that they really have personality. Now that I live in a kind of a more transient place, it doesn't feel like towns have specific personalities, but I just really felt like my hometown is just like it had a vibe, and I wanted readers to be able to feel that, because I think for the Josephs in particular, a big part of their identity comes from, they're not roofers in any other place. I mean, this is sort of like they kind of stake their identity on the fact that this town looks at our family and thinks that we can fix anything. And that
Right.
kind of like messes with each of them in a very particular and unique way. But I don't think this story would have played out the same if it were in any other town, particular because of the way it colors the way the Josephs see themselves. So I really love writing about place. I think it's always fun to think about the way that people reflect where they live, and how landscape reflects the people. I think that's a really cool thing to see in literature. So I enjoy doing that.
What's been the feedback from the town and from your family of roofers?
Yeah. So um I love hearing from people from home. Just they have been so supportive and so excited, and um just I mean, and this is mostly, like moms of people that I went to high school with that are avid readers that were just so excited, and, posting on social media and doing all, and just so wonderful, just people that I really love and respect. So the town has been wonderful. My family, they've been really great. That my parents are both really avid readers, and they've been generous about it, because it's not like, I can imagine what it's like to have a novelist in the family. It's probably like you kind of can see the sausage being made because they all lived a lot of this with me, but meaning in terms of like the setting and everything. But my dad had the best reaction. He the day it came out, he downloaded his Kindle copy and he got the audiobook and he was going back and forth, and I got so many messages from him over the course of like 72 hours of him reading it and just being like, I love this line, and oh, what the chapter so and so had me crying. Like he was bursting with pride in a way. I mean, I think he's always been proud of me, but this book in particular, I think it really like hit home with him to see. I don't know. I'm not sure he's ever read a book about roofers. I know I haven't. And my dad, actually, I saw that question. My dad didn't serve in Vietnam. My grandfather served in World War II. Yeah, so that was sort of, I made some adjustments for Mick in that storyline, but some of that, that stuff about coming home from war and stuff is certainly a family story of mine.
Great questions, Anise. Um, have you had anybody from the town of Mercer think that somebody is in this book? You said you used the scene, but not necessarily people. Have they thought,
Yes.
oh, I think that's so and so?
Yeah, so it's funny because I have gotten, well, did this really happen in your family and things like that? And I'm like, no, no, no. Like this, this is all the plot was made up. This was
Right.
completely from my imagination. But because Cinderland, my first book, also took place in Mercer, that was the book where, people from home were mostly like irritated, like, why wasn't I in it? Like I should have been in it. So I was funny to kind of get that reaction and then have people who are close to me be like, well, so and so, And I will say Mick does bear a little bit of resemblance to my grandfather, just in terms of like, you know, being a guy who kind of fixes everything. And so I do think some people who know my family might draw that conclusion, but all the rest of the characters kind of just came from my imagination. But absolutely, I mean, yeah, people are just kind of curious, which is fun because you know what it means is that the book feels real, which is really exciting.
Absolutely. I also wanted to compliment, I know you mentioned your dad listening to the audiobook. I did as well. I did kind of a combination, and I really liked the narrator. I thought she did a good job with the female male roles and the different ages. Did you have some choice in that at all?
I did. The way that the publisher did it, they send you maybe 3 to 5 options, and it's a 5-minute clip, and you listen to it, and then you can make your preferences known. I think they try to honor what your preferences are, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it didn't. But Maria was my first choice, especially because when I read it, I've listened to an audiobook, the way that women read male characters is kind of a deal breaker for me.
Same.
So I
Same.
thought she did such a great job with it. And I thought, okay, because this book has a lot of, men's voices in it. And so I thought she just did a great job. And it's cool to invite more people kind of into the creative process. So yeah, I'm glad you liked it because it was kind of fun to pick somebody out.
Yeah, I think sometimes when a female's doing the male, it can be distracting away
Yes.
from the story, but for her, it just flowed. So was
Yes.
impressed with her. One of the things that you start out this book was with the quote, and it continues throughout the book. Oh, and first, everybody has read the book, so
Okay.
spoilers are asked for here, and they will start commenting. No, we read. So I just
Perfect,
put that
perfect,
out
perfect.
there
Okay.
first.
Good to know.
But one of the quotes that you start with and continue with is, "What do you want?" That
Yeah,
seemed to be a concurrent theme throughout. And why did you choose that quote and want to keep it moving? Because it goes from beginning to
it
middle to
does. Yeah. You know, one of the things I really wanted to do in this book, many things, because this is a family story, so there's lots of ties that bind in there, but one of them was to really show what it's like to be a woman in a male dominated family at this particular time, in this particular place, and what it's also like to be a woman in this male dominated industry of roofing, which Marley is. And a lot of the women in my life were too, my mom, my mom's best friend, my aunt, my grandmother. This was sort of the life that they grew up in. And I really think it's important to show what lack of choice looks like and how that lack of choice for a woman can cascade throughout generations. And I wanted to show someone like Marley really fighting to break this pattern of I don't have a choice, I don't have a choice. Because that's what happens with Elise, right? She kind of gets to a certain point of her life and she's like, wait, did I even choose any of this? How did I end up here? And I wanted Marley to be able to say, no, I'm choosing this and choosing this. And to have somebody in her life like Waylon who says, it matters to me what you want. And I'm going to ask you, and your voice matters. So not only is it important that he asks, but I think it's also important that somebody like Marley really learns how to state, how to figure out what she wants. Because that's the other thing too. When you grow up in a place where you can kind of see women are, um, you know, their husbands are out roofing, so they kind of just pick up the slack, like, okay, I'll figure out payroll, I'll figure out insurance, I'm going to raise our kids, I'll put dinner on the table. They don't have a ton of choices, but they don't complain about any of it. And I just wanted to show somebody coming into that situation and saying, like, I want this to be better for everyone. If it's better for me, it will also be better for you. And my having a choice is a sign of health. And my ability to say no and my willingness to say no is good for everybody in our family. So I just kind of wanted to show what that journey might look like, because it's not something that can be fixed overnight or in one conversation or the answer to one question. I think it really happens over the course of a lifetime. So I wanted to show sort of that struggle of giving yourself a choice, but I also wanted to show that these women are not cautionary tales. You know what I mean? I think that they would really, the women that I know never felt that way, even though they might not have had a ton of choices. They still have found a way to celebrate what they've built, and they make their way even still. So I wanted to like celebrate and highlight that as well.
Well, her mother also, Marley's mother was also a very good role model with that. And
Yeah.
I love that she said that you can define the moment for leaving and when to stay. In other words, the ability to leave can define a woman in a small town as much as her choice to stay, I think was the quote. So for me, that was an important, and you talk about that Mercury, hard to leave,
Yeah.
hard to find, hard to leave kind of thing. But I thought that was so important because at least I don't think had that. She had a,
Right.
you're just going. There's no real choice in the matter.
That's absolutely it. And I think, it is easy to look at a traditional family model where we say, okay, we've got Mick and Elise and the three kids and eat dinner together every night and think like, oh, that must be the healthy, quote unquote, healthier family. But really, like Ruth's ability to say, like, I have to move or I'm gonna do what I need to do, it creates a lot of health in her relationship with her daughter. They're very honest, they're very loving, they don't hold grudges. So I really, it was important to me to say, you know what, families can look a lot of different ways, and the way that you love each other is sort of paramount over everything else. Even if it means some nights you're eating popcorn for dinner at 11 p.m., like if there's love in that household, then that's a really beautiful and important thing. So Ruth was such a fun character to write because I really wanted there to be somebody who said the right thing at the right time. Because when you've been in that position where maybe you feel like you're at your lowest, and oftentimes somebody comes in and they just say the worst thing to you. I just wanted Marley to have somebody that says the right thing. So,
And I was so glad Ruth was there for that reason. I mean, when she said, oh, the quote is something like head on straight, heart on straight.
yeah.
Like it really kind of grounds Marley in a way that says, I can do this and do it the right way. It sort of reminded me, I don't know if anybody's ever watched Friday Night Lights, but
Oh, yeah. Oh,
your
yeah.
eyes full heart can't lose. Like
Big
it's that
fan.
sort of saying that like sticks with you. I
Yes.
really liked it.
Yeah, that phrase kind of came about because when I do book events, especially with Cinderland, I would notice like I can get pretty nervous and things like that because you want to represent yourself well, and people who've read the book want to engage with you, and I for both Cinderland and Shiner, I had written myself like this long letter about like, okay, when you are talking about certain things, remember this and blah blah blah, and they just got so long that I was like, I need a shorthand here. I need a shorthand for like the talk I'm going to have with myself before I do some of these public events. And
Mhm.
it came down to head on straight, heart on straight, which is sort of like, be clear, but also be present is sort of what it is. So that's kind of, it became a mantra that I said to myself, or say to
Yeah.
myself, I should say, kind of before I do things that I feel nervous about. And so I was like, it belongs in the book. So
I love it. I kind of want a sticker for my laptop or my water
me
bottle.
too. I want that too.
Tote bag, something like it's too good not to have
I love
something.
that idea.
It's a great relationship and it's so different from the other relationships in Marley's life, Ruth versus the rest of the family. The other thing I think that is so interesting with Mercury is that two women that make such a big impact come from the outside. Elise, although we don't see her gain all this stature, we know it when Marley meets her that she
Yeah.
is a person that means something in that town. And then Marley ends up building that as well. But both of them are outsiders, which I find
Yeah.
fascinating because in a small town like that, sometimes that doesn't happen.
It's true. And I think in order to come in and do what they did, you have to be a strong person, which they both are, even though their strength manifests in very different ways. Um, you're absolutely right. They kind of like neither one of them is going to be rolled over or steamrolled or anything like that. And I think what is really important about getting an outside perspective is that they can kind of pinpoint things and say, this is what is wrong here. And something that people, if you've grown up with that all your life or you've lived in a certain place all your life, you can't see it. And so that's what I love about Marley. She's kind of able to come in and be like, well, this is happening and I see this. And um, I think, it ruffles feathers, but it's like ultimately a good thing. And it makes, for a good plot in a novel for sure.
Absolutely. You know how you talked about your long list that you were right before events? Shay kind of had something like that
Yes.
in his
Yes.
process as well. That reminds me a little bit of his mantra. Where did that come from? Same?
So I will say, so Shay and I circumstantially are like very different people, but if I had to say there's somebody that I'm the most similar to, it's him. So he's kind of like my favorite character because he really looks at the world in a kind of an introspective way, and he is searching for something to measure himself by that feels real and feels earned, because he's realizing like all the structures that have been built around him are kind of fake and faulty. And I wanted there to be a character who's like the kind of the most important conversations that they have are the ones they have with himself.
Mhm.
And that's him to a T. Is he is sort of really, because he's by necessity living where he does when he does, he's alone. And in order to be true to himself, he has to separate. And that's a really, really hard thing for a 19-year-old kid to have to reckon with. And I think he does it in such a beautiful and honest way that also maintains like the love that he has for the people around him. So um, I just wanted to show like how somebody processes life when they feel like they can't actually talk, right? What would he say if he could actually share with us what he's feeling? So those pages were fun to write. It was like, very much in my head about what somebody who's in that situation might be thinking. And it was, I gave him sort of my melancholy love, I guess I'll call it.
Well, I think his
So he
introspective,
sort of felt like my friend.
right, his thought process was so fascinating because one, like we are getting to see what's in his head, but it's not static. It evolves. Like when he
Yeah.
first sees his mother dying, he thinks that she's blaming him or that she hates him. But the more he thinks, the more he evolves and realizes that's not it. And so that's what's so fascinating with getting that introspective, view is it's just I don't know, like I think that's why I loved being in their head so much because it wasn't just one track thought. Like it did evolve.
Yeah, and I think something I really wanted to explore with the book is like, what does it really mean when there's this big event that happens, like it happens with Elise's death, and you just revisit it and revisit it and revisit it. And it is going to mean one thing when it first happens. And then as you revisit it, it kind of takes on a whole other meaning. And that's, I think there's, and I think I put this in the book, but there is sort of like kind of two ways to know a person, sort of like in their life and then in their death. And it's kind of like he's getting to know his mother anew because he's growing up, and there's something about the way that Patrick is with him that makes him have some self-compassion, which I think is really important, and I wanted that for him. Because kind of hard earned for him. So he was my, yeah, he's my favorite character.
He's a great character. I really did like Shay. As somebody said, Shay baby like that. I tend to say that as well because Marley
Yeah.
uses it so often. Um, let's talk about Mick though, because he is the exact opposite of Shay, I feel like, in so many
Yes.
ways, more so than anybody else. Where did he come from and why did you need him to be the way he was?
So I mentioned before, he is in some ways inspired by my own grandfather, who was the head of the roofing business for a time, before my dad took over. And um, I made him the way that he is because I feel like there were a lot of men of his generation that were just like that, where it sort of was like they always saw themselves as the hero of their own story, and they could not contemplate a world where somebody else might be the hero, right? And so it's every narrative that is happening, they have to be the center of. And that causes problems when you have children and then they kind of see you acting that way. Um, I I just he was somebody that is like we had a family member like that, and you can kind of see how the way he is cascades throughout the way siblings interact in his family, and then the way grandchildren interact in his family, and that's a lot of power to give a person. And I also love the idea of saying, okay, if everybody in Mercury looks at the Joseph family and says, oh, this is what it means to be a Joseph, is that you can fix anybody and your mixed son, that's what they think. But then when you actually ask the people in the house, what is it like to be a member of this family, you get a completely different answer. I love writing and reading things where you kind of get the story behind the story, and what happens if you talk to the people that have been kind of written out of the story, and that's who everyone is, the three sons and Marley. Um, so I didn't want to take him down so much as say question, what are we really serving here when we have this kind of like patriarchal setup? It sort of is like poisoning everybody, including him to some extent.
If you could diagnose him, what would you diagnose Mick with?
I would say PTSD,
Mhm.
first of all, and then I would also say manic depressive, perhaps bipolar,
Yeah.
um, a mix of things like that. Um, and in his defense, there just were not any ways to kind of treat something like that effectively in the
Right.
90s. Like, it's just so much easier now to diagnose, and there's so many more resources. I mean, I think for Mick's character, he's not even aware that something's wrong with him, you know what I mean? And it's kind of, he's in a
Oh,
situation
so
where
he,
he thinks everyone else, it's
yeah.
everyone else's problem, and I think if you have a member of your family who has a mental illness, which I have, I'm sure many people do, the getting a diagnosis is really freaking hard.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you get a diagnosis and you're like, is this even right? And then the treatment sometimes works and sometimes it doesn't. So it's not sort of like this cut and dry thing. It is sort of this lifelong process of being like, okay, we try to help you as much as we can, but then there's also this is what it is.
Yeah,
So,
Mick has put himself so much on a pedestal, and I think not just Elise, I think Mick has done it himself to
Mhm.
separate himself. But Baylor really calls him on it and it's like, you're not God, like you
Yeah.
can't make these decisions. But the town really doesn't see it. It's like you said, it's that inner circle that has to deal with him on a day-to-day basis because he does have that complex.
Absolutely. And there is something to be said really for what happens behind closed doors.
Oh gosh.
Why would you
Okay.
why would you
So
diagnose a hitting on you?
biggest question I'm sure you get asked. Did Elise ask for that or did Mick prescribe and feed her the pills? What do you
So
think?
I'm going to tell you what I think. So
Yeah.
I Marley's opinion is my opinion. I put my words in her mouth that I think Mick looked at this situation and he felt afraid of what it was going to do to him, afraid of maybe how it was going to inconvenience him, and he was like, I'm just taking care of this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to assume or maybe project that this is what she wants because this is what's best for me, because really that's what he's done their entire marriage is, I what is best for me is what's best for the family. And everybody bought into that for a time, and it's actually Elise's death that makes that lie completely come undone. But when I was writing it, I wanted to leave room for other perspectives, because I think if this really did happen in a family, there would be disagreements about like, well,
Oh,
maybe, and I feel like that's very true to life too. And sometimes as a family, those moments where you're like, we do not agree on what happened can make or break you as a family and say, are we going to become stronger for this? Or are we all going to be estranged for the rest of our lives? You know?
absolutely. I mean, no one wants to believe anything that horrible, whether or not
Yes.
it's in the back of your head or not. And I think when she says you can't make him a saint, after the fact, it's so true, but that happens because people don't want to believe something like that. But then at the end, we get Baylor's perspective, and he tried it once before with the gas, the carbon
Yeah.
monoxide. I'm like, holy crud.
Yeah. And that's why, Baylor is a favorite of mine as well, because he's a jerk. We all know it. But he is the jerk who is going to call his dad on his crap. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I'm like, that is so necessary. Like, and, Waylon maybe is from the outside the savior of the family, quote unquote, but it is really Baylor who is like, I'm putting a stop to this, or tries to at least. And there's a lot of love in that, even though it's gruff and he says the wrong thing. He really will put himself on the line when he's like, what you're doing is wrong, you know?
And I don't think Baylor band-aids it either. I mean, he's willing
Yeah.
to give up his prized
Yeah.
Camaro. He's willing to take his dad's piano, even though that could have been, or I mean, who knows how Mick would have reacted to that. The fact that Mick wanted to take that drum set, oh, I was over it at that point. I'm like, you're trying to take
Yeah.
the drum set, like I'm over you, Mick. But and then at the last scene, when he throws his body, like how Shay describes it, he doesn't even think twice. It's like he was meant to save me. It makes you love Baylor even more, even if he is so gruff and makes stupid mistakes.
And that's, the reason I just felt like this book had to have a Baylor in it was that everybody has a Baylor in their life. Maybe it's somebody that you dated and it didn't work out. Maybe it's a family member, an uncle, a brother, whoever, just somebody that, has so much potential and cannot articulate anything, but and yet will do these unbelievably radical acts of just selflessness that literally will take your breath away. And he's like, my goodness, like this person has these like uncharted territories within them. And so I just feel like everybody, even if you've never met any roofers, even if you don't live in a small town, everybody kind of knows a person like that you're feeling like if they could just unlock themselves, they could be so present in an amazing way for the people in their lives. And sometimes those people are able to unlock that and sometimes they aren't.
Well, his family didn't do him any service, like his mom and
Absolutely.
dad. I mean,
Yep.
because he was told to be quiet, like not even
Yeah.
speak. So he's not prepared to even speak of emotions because he was never asked to, or no one wanted to hear from him,
Right.
So
And that's how it is in a family. You know what I mean? Like when you're meeting somebody, if you meet Waylon first, you kind of get his side of the story, and then you reach to the other players, and they have this completely different read on the same situation. That to me is exactly what it means to be a member of a large family. It's like we have a completely different opinions on this one thing that happened, or what it was like to grow up in this house.
So let's stick to Baylor for a minute because
Yeah.
he fell in love with Jade. I mean,
Hmm.
like it was very sweet. Was that one-sided, or do you think there was something there with
I
Jade? And obviously, it ended when he
yeah.
kissed Marley, right? But before
Hmm. So I actually wrote this many different ways, and the first way that I wrote it was, when she says, I want to know why you keep coming into my shop. She's like there for it, for him,
yeah,
romantically and stuff like that. And because as Baylor's creator, shall we say, I wanted him to be worthy of somebody like Jade, right? But the truth is he doesn't deserve her, at least in that point of his life. And there's something about her ability to say no to him that completely changes his life. And that is sort of what sets him on the course to become a better human was, Jade saying, I am afraid of you. Nothing will ever happen between us. So I I think there was probably some attraction there, but Jade has standards in such a way that it's like I would rather be alone than sacrifice my standards.
Mhm.
And which is a bit, of a difference maybe between her and Marley. But so I do, but I just think she was sort of in a place that was like she knows what she's going to tolerate, and she's a one and done, and that was it. So, but I did write it in many ways, and it was really hard for me to do that to both of them, because in my mind I thought there's definitely a universe where they could work out and be
Right.
together.
I
But then I
wasn't
just,
sure. Like I was like, how is she gonna end this? And then it was like, oh, she found the contractor and she's
yeah, because
great. I'm like, oh, that door closed. But
yeah, and I just was like,
yeah,
he didn't deserve. She's too good for him.
yeah. And Jake
Even though
was. I
I
mean,
love him, and I'm like, I
I love
want him
Jake
to be
too,
happy.
yeah. And I think what it did do was it opened him up for the feeling of what does love actually feel like, or what
Yes.
am I looking for? I don't know that he was actually ready at that time anyways, but at
Yes.
least he realizes he wasn't really in love with Marley. And I think that was the
Yes.
point that you had to get to separate, to make that triangle not a triangle, you know.
Absolutely. And I think, when I was talking with some early readers of the book and we're talking about Baylor, I just was like, this is the realest character in the book. Is that I just have so many friends that have dated a man like this and had to get out, you know? So I I liked the idea of it giving Baylor a shot. Like, if that's what you want, you have to be worthy of it. If that's the kind of woman you want, like, you can't be a child anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So,
And Patty says that she knew her worth, and Jill said
yeah, that's right.
if you wanted them together, it felt authentic the way you ended it. And I agree. Baylor also did a horrible thing when he hit Marley
Yeah,
and ended up causing her to
yeah.
have a miscarriage. That was a pretty hard part to read as a reader, and I'm
Hmm.
sure if someone has gone through that, it's even harder. But I did love the theme, can a body heal and still hurt? Because to
Hmm.
me, that was so important, because it's not like something that's just over, right? Like her
Right.
body's healing, but she's still so hurt. Why did you want that? Because I mean, that makes Baylor even worse, right? Like it really puts him even further down the rung. So why did you go there?
I think um, I wanted to show that at that particular moment, this family is absolutely devastated by the woman that they have lost, and their inability to talk talk about it leads to unintentional violence. That's exactly what it is. Their inability to sit down with each other and say, I really wish, it makes me mad that mom favored you over me, or I wish that she had done this, or why was dad this way. Their inability to kind of have that open discussion ends up causing physical harm. And I just feel like that is a very real reality in a lot of families. And I wanted to kind of push the characters to their breaking point. Like, what would it be? What would need to happen for Marley to actually leave
Mhm.
and say enough of this? Because she's somebody that is like not necessarily going to go down with the ship, but she is sure as hell going to patch as many holes as she can. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
what would it take for her to say, actually, I'm not safe here. I love these people, but I'm not safe, and to leave. So I think it had to be something pretty serious where it's like, you know, maybe an accident, but really, like, Baylor had no business being even around her in the state that he was in. So
Yeah.
um, I wanted to take him to the lowest point so he could reach rock bottom and then figure out that he actually has what it takes to claw himself out.
Well, this book started, under the bleachers, but it also started with Marley and her mom coming into town
Yeah.
and seeing
Mm-hmm.
these roofers on, up high. But
Yep.
the book didn't end with with those men. It ended with
Yeah.
Marley and her daughter Evangeline on the roof.
Yeah.
So why did you decide to put them at that peak point and have that view and end it that way?
I I think the reason I did it is because when you so this book is a lot about legacy and inheritance, right? And what those things look like when you don't have any money. And in this family, there's a lot at stake that doesn't have anything to do with money. And the truth is, legacy and inheritance matter just as much to the women as it does to the men, but it looks very different for them because it's not their last name on on the side of the truck. It's not, they're not the ones that are putting on the roof and things like that. But the women are also completely, Marley is so responsible for the success and the health of this business. And um, I wanted to show what it might look like for women to say, like, this is my life too. This is my inheritance. Like, that was something really special for me about writing this book is that, I come from a family of roofers, my dad, my grandpa, my uncles, my brother. But roofing has never felt like mine. I'm scared to death of heights. I am not mechanically minded at all. But writing this book made me feel like this is how I make it my inheritance too, and that's exactly what Marley is giving her daughter at the end is saying like this is our family, but you don't have to do it the way that the men do it. Like we can find our own path. Um, and guess what? The men are not the only ones that get to take risks. The men are not the only ones that get to see this beautiful view. Like that's available to us too. So I wanted there to be a change of the narrative that it starts with the men that get that view, but at the end there's an evolution there perhaps.
Well, I love that you started and set the scene with a real timeline of rituals passing father to son through President Bush to his son, President Bush, right? Because that sort of sets a scene and lets us know legacy is going to be a thing. And
Yeah.
I thought that that was a great start for us to think about throughout because it was, for me, that really tied it in to that last moment that you were just talking about with Marley. It was great. All right, people, if you have questions, remember you can ask them. I'm going to do my signature rapid fire questions. So,
Oh,
Amy
yay.
Jo, you just get to
Yay.
say quickly what's on your mind, and y'all be thinking of what your questions are. All right, hardback or soft cover,
Oh, soft cover, 100%.
plotter or pantser,
Pantser.
noise or silence when writing.
Oh, silence.
Where's your favorite place to write?
My bed.
Favorite 90s artist song? I'm wondering if it's Janet Jackson, but what's your, do you have one?
I did. It is Janet Jackson. That's the way love goes.
I knew
Yeah.
it. I love that song. I couldn't get it out of my head when it was playing in Jade's studio. So I was like,
That's it.
oh.
Yeah. That's it.
You like to cook or do you take out?
Oh, takeout. I'd mostly cook, but I prefer takeout.
Do you hire or are you going to be a DIY home project person?
Higher. I wish I was DIY.
I,
Everyone else in my family is DIY. I didn't get that gene.
and I think I know the answer to this one because you said you're afraid of heights, but are you a harness person or are you going to be just on that roof?
Oh, harness. Absolutely.
Do you prefer Jade or Marley?
Jade.
And your favorite brother? I think you already mentioned this one.
Shay is my favorite brother overall, and Baylor was my favorite to write.
Fun. Awesome. Thanks so much for answering all
Those are
those.
great questions. Thank you.
Who here has a question for Amy Jo? If so, raise your hand and I'm going to spotlight you and you can ask it yourself. If you don't want to ask it yourself, you can always put it in the chat box and I will ask it for you. So I will go back and look and see if there are any more. And if not, y'all know I have a ton of questions here. I could talk all night. All right. So I have a question right now. What are you working on? Because I
Oh,
haven't, you've had a memoir, you've had
yeah.
Steiner and now Mercury. So are you
Mhm.
working on something else that you can tell us about?
Sure. This past year, I've been trying a couple different things. I've been working on screenwriting. There's some writers that were interested in maybe adapting Shiner for the screen. So those things, Hollywood is like very fickle. So I don't know if it will work out, but what was really great was that I kind of got to learn how to do it and had some people teach me, which has been really fun. So that was one project. I'm working on another novel. It is about uh, the true story behind the disappearance of a famous folk singer and about the young woman who kind of holds the secret to her past. So that's what I'm working on now. I don't know if it will be my next book. I hope it will, but it's going to depend on if I can pull it together. But it's about you know female mentorship and what women do for each other and how hard things we live through in life can make the most beautiful art. So it's been a really like rewarding thematically to work on and fun because
That's
part of
like
it
a
is set in
certain region.
Nashville and yeah.
Where is it set? I meant, did you
Yeah,
say?
so part of it is set in Nashville and then part of it is also set in Western Pennsylvania. It kind of goes back and forth.
Okay. Amanda asked, I could see Mercury adapted into a TV series as well. Do you think that this will be into existence sometime?
I think it's possible. I've definitely had a few conversations, but nothing close to concrete yet. I mean, it is, I feel like in Hollywood, a number of things have to align, and I don't understand it yet, but there are some people who are really talented who have been enthusiastic about it. What has to happen is that a lot of people have to say yes, and somebody's got to back it financially, but it's looking like it could, maybe a TV series or something, but it would be really fun to kind of have like an ongoing family drama. It would be super fun. I hope it happens. I don't know. I'm not holding my breath because Hollywood is weird, but it would be super great and it would be fun. I would watch it, right?
So I would too.
There's lots of
Um,
fun things you can do, right? With aerial views and roofers doing weird things and all that. So it would be good. It would have laughs. It would be sad. It would be everything you want. I
exactly.
think.
And a follow up to Amanda's question that I'm going to ask, did you
Yeah.
picture any specific actors or actresses when you were writing these characters?
Yes, I did. I don't always, but this book in particular, I just let me see. So I always saw Marley as Emma Stone, and um, I saw Waylon as Andrew Garfield. They are not together anymore, but I just had them together in my mind, Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield. And then Elise, I always saw as Michelle Pfeiffer, and I think Ed Harris would make a really great Mick. And then I don't know. I saw Timothy Chalamet maybe or Tom Holland as Shay, and then Baylor was kind of hard for me to nail down because I had him in my head. So he was one I couldn't quite land on. And then like America Ferrera or Tessa Thompson, I thought would make a great Jade.
Yeah.
So you have any suggestions?
Those all sound fantastic, actually. And I had the same issue with Baylor. Like he was a persona, not a
Yeah,
face for me, but he had like such a presence.
yeah,
Um,
archetypal.
yeah. I'm thinking like a Yellowstone sort of, you know.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's kind of the vibe in it. It's almost like it kind of diminishes him when you sort of put a certain face on it. So that's kind of why
Exactly.
I had a hard time with it. But
Tanya asked, how long does it typically take for you to write a novel?
so this one, usually it feels like it takes me forever. I mean, ugh, oh my goodness. Like, let me see. This one was relatively quick. I feel like I started writing it August of 2021, and it sold the next October. So it took me less than a year to write, which for me is really, really fast. It was kind of a really special experience. This book felt like once I sat down and listened, I was kind of overhearing a conversation that was happening at the next table. And I just had to like write it down. Um, but Shiner took probably 3 or 4 years, probably. And I had two kids within the writing of that book. So that was kind of, up like this with, newborns, you know how that goes. But um, so I would say anywhere between 1 to 4 years. It kind of depends on the project and how much time it takes. And a lot of it is sort of like me figuring out emotionally what the book is doing. And I have a lot of personal growth as I'm working on a book. And sometimes that is the holdup is that I realize I haven't quite cracked the emotional code of the book and kind of what I'm learning from it about myself and that sometimes is what takes the longest is for me to sort of figure, well, what do you actually like? What question are you asking here? Um, that is sometimes is what takes the longest.
Do you stay in your own writer's bubble or do you work with other authors or beta readers to help you get through that process?
I I work alone for a pretty long time until I feel like I have a draft that I'm really really proud of. Just because I play around with a lot of stuff and I don't really care if things don't make sense for the first couple of drafts because I'm working some things out in my head. So I think it's kind of chaotic to bring in a reader that early. But I do have a small group of writers that will read my drafts when they're ready. So there are other writers, like Katie Gutierrez, who wrote More Than You'll Ever Know. Julia Fine is a good friend of mine, and Sarah Sliger. So these are other, kind of literary and thriller writers and stuff like that. And so they are the ones that I trust to read my book before I send it to my agent. So I will get it as far as I can, and then I'll have them take a look at it.
That's cool that you have that community
It
there.
is. They're wonderful. It's the best. It feels like, it's hard to have coworkers when you're a writer, so I consider them kind of like my work besties.
Well, Tanya said she doesn't have a question, but she wanted to say Mercury is one of her favorite books ever, that
Oh my
she's read
gosh.
lots, hundreds of books a year, and she just wanted to say that. And Patty
Thank
has,
you. That means
I'm
so
going to go
much
ahead
to
and
me.
ask you to unmute. Did you want to say something? Let me go ahead and add you spotlight. Go ahead.
Hi, love this book, but I really love Shiner. That was like one of my favorite books. Anyway, so my comment was the book starts in the attic. Well, that's not what it starts, but that's
Okay.
like the main mystery, the
Hmm.
dead body. And it seems to me like everybody at one point was involved with that attic.
Yes.
So, like they discover the body, but then when the pastor died, um, Marley and Jay were involved helping Elise kind of like
Yeah.
cover the body. And then Shay and Patrick,
Hmm.
what did they do?
They
Did they
painted over the hatch.
Mhm.
Yes. And
Yeah.
then Bay Bay or Bay,
Yeah. Hmm.
he was involved as well too, right? What
Yes.
did he do?
He rolls the body up
The
and he leaves it
plastic.
up in there in plastic.
Yeah, so I mean, everybody was involved in it, and nobody knew that they were involved. So that was to me was like a big discovery. I'm like, whoa, yeah. So
Yeah.
that comment,
Oh, thank you, Patty. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and thank you for loving Shiner. That means so much to me.
yeah,
I really wanted to make sure everybody held a little piece of the truth in this particular story, and to have them all, kind of be present in one way or another within that attic. And the thing is, the book would have been maybe 10 pages if these people had just sort of sat down and had an actual conversation. So I like the idea that they were all kind of like holding something close to the vest, each of them thinking like, I and only I can save this family. And so I'm like, and they kind of, it's like a dagger in their chest to say, I will keep this secret. And the truth is that the secret keeping is what's bringing them all down. You know what I mean? But they all are convinced that they're the ones that are going to kind of save the family. So,
yeah.
and
It was a
they're
great.
all bad at it.
Great observation,
Thank
Pat.
you.
But
Thank you, Patty.
I do love that observation, though, that everybody was in the attic, I think, except for Mick, who is supposed to be head of the household. And
That's right. Yeah.
everybody else was at some point in that room, in that attic at some, it was fascinating. Mick just takes up so much space, the house, the business, headspace. Heck, he even writes so much, he takes up the whole page.
Yep.
I am glad though that he didn't take up so much of your story. It was enough, but I love that so many people were, planets were orbiting around, because it was a great mix of different perspectives. How did you choose you were going to use to give us parts of the story?
So I knew from the beginning that I didn't want to have mixed voice in there because, in this fictional Mercury universe, everybody in town thinks of Mick as the hero of the family. It's his name on the business, it's his name on the deed of the house. Everybody sort of knows Mick's story already. So when I thought about, as I said earlier, kind of telling the story behind the story, reaching toward other players, all of that, I started with Waylon, the middle child. I'm a middle child, so I thought he was a great place to start. And I kind of thought at the beginning, like it was just going to be Waylon and Marley. This is their story back and forth, kind of this love story that kind of goes throughout the course of a marriage. But then as I started writing and I realized that this is a big family, I don't think you can tell a family novel if you don't let the siblings speak. Because, if you guys have ever been at a family dinner and you're sharing some sort of story, you always have somebody saying, no, 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 that is not how that happened. Like, this is what happened. And so much of writing this book was me feeling like I was at their dinner table and I would hear, like, Waylon's whole perspective about something, and then Baylor being like, no, 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 like, let me tell you what happened. And then Shay was like, actually, that's so it was very much like just what I imagined it would be like at their dinner table if they were allowed to say whatever was actually on their mind. And that's kind of how I wrote it, was just sort of whoever's voice kind of popped into my head. It was a very like instinctual writing process, but it grew over time because I really did think it would just be Marley and Waylon. And then I had a point where I said, "Oh my goodness, there's so many narrators that no publisher is ever going to think that this is okay." But I found such a wonderful publisher who really believed in it. So that's been such a great experience.
It's a perfect example of your pantser
Yeah.
preference. Amanda, I agree with this, says what I think worked so well for this book were the complexity of each character, and we got to see the growth of every single one. Nobody was left behind. So,
Thank
um,
you.
agreed. It was fantastic. I do want to save the last question and just find out what a book recommendation or recommendations would be for us, but maybe not something not so obvious.
Sure. Okay, so I will say I read a family drama recently that hasn't come out yet. I think it's coming out maybe in the fall or over the summer, but it is called Pierce Oysters by Jocelyn Takacs. I think is her last name, Takacs. Have you heard of it, Laura Beth?
I have heard of it, but I haven't seen it or read it yet.
So
So,
it is about the BP oil spill in 2010, and it's about a family business of oyster farmers and how the oil spill really messes with their family business, but it also is it's just kind of like the Josephs, where it's like whatever's happening in the business is really like this microcosm for what's happening in the family. So I finished that not that long ago, and I really enjoyed it. Set in New Orleans or like outside of New Orleans, which is pretty fun. So I'd recommend that. And then I'm going to say two more books because it's one that I'm going to recommend. I feel like everybody has read, but I started the Fourth Wing series. I have never ever read fantasy, anything about dragons, whatever. My sister texted me and she was like, I'm reading this book and I feel like you should read it. I'm like, okay. And so I start it and I get 100 pages in. And the whole time I'm like, I don't see what all the fuss is about. And then I got hooked on it. And so I finished The Fourth Wing and now I'm reading Iron Flame. So those books have been on the bestsellers list for a year. So there's nothing new for me to recommend that. So, but just it is unexpected. I never ever thought I would ever read anything like that and get so into it. I'm like, I did not know I was a dragon person.
I
I mean, and
love
like, listen,
covering that.
if you're looking for like lyrical flights of fancy, like this is not your journey. Like that's not what this book is. But if you just sort of want like a page turner, it'll scratch that itch. And then I think another unexpectedly lovable book that I read this year. I've been trying to read this year. I usually set a quota of like however many books I want to read per year, and I said this year I'm going to slow down and read some long books because I'm really scared of long books. And so I just picked a couple. And the first one that I ended up finishing this year is called Live from New York. And it is an oral history of Saturday Night Live. And it starts in 1975, goes all the way through, the early 2000s, just a history of the show, but it's told by the actors, the writers, the producers, and it is so fascinating. You feel like you're kind of there listening to the people talk about everything that went wrong and all the things behind the scenes and how they kind of put on a live show every week. And every year when I start my reading, in January, I try to read a book about creativity. And that ended up being it for me. It just was very inspiring about people say, we don't put on a show at 11:30 on Saturday because we're ready. We put it on because it's 11:30. And I'm like, man, there's something really beautiful about having that sort of like artistic risk every week in your life. So I really, really recommend that. It was such a fun read.
Well, it's kind of interesting too when you think about the SNL family with this family, like listening into those conversations
Yes.
and how things may not be the same. I don't know. Like, I think there's a neat comparison there.
It's so true because you would have, whoever edited it, they were so smart about it because they would quote somebody who said, well, this is exactly how this happened. And then the next chunk would be somebody else being like, no, that's not how this happened. You
Right.
know what I mean? So they were like very judicious and interesting the way that they edited it and put it together. And it's a show that I've always loved, but just seeing the creativity piece that goes into it and all, and just it really feels like a family. Like that's how they described it. So I really enjoyed that book.
Cool. And I'm glad you brought up Pierce oysters because that was one on my radar. I grew up on the Southeast Texas coastline, so very similar to the Louisiana coastline. So I'm very interested to read about that. I think it sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And it was a good mix of sort of learning about that natural disaster, but also bringing it to a very personal, like what might this actually do to a family? What does it expose in the family and that kind of thing. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
And if you do want more recommendations, please check out Amy Jo's website. You will find Tracey Lange on there, who
Oh yeah.
recommended this book to our readers, to our club here. We did The Connollys of County Down. So if you haven't read that, please do. And you can check out that recording.
Such a great book.
Such a great book. Such a great book.
She's
But
got another one coming out in August, I think.
oh, wow, that's soon. That's awesome.
I might be wrong, but it's coming out
Okay.
soon. Maybe not that soon, but I know I'm very excited. I can't wait to read it.
Look out for sure. Well, in 2 weeks, we're going to be chatting with Emily R. Austin to talk about her novel, Interesting Facts About Space. You may have seen it. Speaking of Saturday Night Live, it was on The Tonight Show as one of the recommended picks. It didn't make it to the end, but it was nominated as one of his book club picks. It's a fast paced, hilarious, and ultimately hopeful novel for anyone who's ever worried they might be a terrible person. I love it. Brimming with quirky humor, charm, and heart, interesting facts about space effortlessly shows us the power of revealing our secret shames, the most beautifully human parts of us all. And what a great follow up to Mercury. Now we're moving into interesting facts about space. So
I
I mean,
love it.
if I were writing a paper, this would be a great transition. So that's our next book. But guys, I want to give you a little bit of heads up. We're going to have 3 weeks back to back. So right after that, we have William Kent Kruger for The River We Remember on May 6th, and then
Ooh.
Laurie Frankel, which is Family on May 13th. So please plan out your holds, your reading, so you can join us. You don't want to miss any of those. I'm so excited. Thank you, Amy Jo. I'm just so excited that you could join us today. Like I said, check out her Instagram. She's very active there, and also her website if you want to look up those book recommendations. If you don't mind, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, LB the Lover of Books, and I hope to see you there. But please look for reviews, recommendations, more author chats. And again, I'm going to see y'all in 2 weeks. Amy Jo, you've been awesome tonight. Thank you so much.
So have you all. Thank you so much for tuning in on a Monday and for Laura Beth for being such a great host and bringing so many people together. This is a real gift for a writer to get to do this sort of thing. So thank you all for reading the book with an open heart. It just is really meaningful. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Angel. Bye,
Have
everybody.
a good
Have a great
night.
night.